For those of y'all that aren't familiar with Tom and I, my name is Brink Fiddler. I own a company called Defend Systems here in Nashville, Tennessee, and our primary focus is physical security consulting and active shooter mitigation training for schools, corporations, healthcare, nonprofits, law firms, etc. Tom owns Herring Technology, which is a security technology solutions company. Basically, if somebody has a security technology that they need, want to know about, Tom is the resource. Also, Tom is the guy that gets the call if somebody has a really unusual security need or problem, and Tom is usually the person that is able to solve it via whether it's cameras or access control or video analytics or gunshot detection systems, all the above. They are the best in the industry. Because of our companies being in the same space, we work together quite a bit, but for obvious reasons. He's the technology piece of what I do in the consulting world, and I'm the training piece of what he does in the security world. So we got together several years ago, and every once in a while we'll get together and do an episode like this. And in light of the Uvalde, Texas shooting, that's what brings us back here today. And Tom reached out a couple days ago and wanted to do another one. So Tom, let's give everybody out of there kind of what we have in mind and kind of what we're going to try and go over on this episode.
Okay. We, unfortunately when we get together for these special ones, something violent has occurred. And it's come to light, that I think on this one we're finally at a point that people are willing to start listening to what can we do to not only prevent these, even though some are going to be unpreventable.
Right.
But in that case, then how do we mitigate the carnage that's done? I think, we've spent a lot of time in this country arguing, every time this happens, what comes up?
For sure, gun control. Yep.
Gun control. And we argue it and we argue it and we argue it. And, the right says we have to keep it. The left says we got to get rid of all guns and, whatever it is. Let's just make that statement up front. I'm for some gun control as far as checks go. Are we eliminating anything? No. Is that going to solve the problem, of hostile events? No. So let's try and get together today to discuss what can be done. Not just from a government standpoint, but an individual standpoint.
Yeah, and I think both sides of the aisle now are willing to at least have a conversation around what can we do to reduce the chances of a mentally ill individual getting their hands on any kind of weapon. There's obviously been a lot of press around the AR-15 for, obvious reasons. A lot of the bigger mass shootings have involved an AR-15, but the reality is that in most mass shootings, over 80% are with a handgun. But again, Virginia Tech, that dude killed 30 people with 2 handguns. So to me, it's not about the weapon system as much as it is how do we prevent mentally ill people from getting their hands on guns is the conversation I think both sides of the aisle are beginning to have. The left side, who's traditionally been like, we got to take all guns, even that side of the aisle is beginning to say, okay, yeah, whatever. But what else? We need to have a serious talk. Like what can really be done? Because there's 390 million guns in the country, so we're late, right? So let's. I think that for some meaningful change to happen, we are certainly going to have to come together, both sides. What that looks like, I don't know, but at least it seems like both sides are willing to talk.
Absolutely, and kind of what I wanted to talk about today is, who are we expecting to make these changes?
Sure.
Is it the business owners? Is it the school administrative? Is it the local jurisdiction, over codes? Is it the federal government? Well, let's be real.
Yeah.
You leave it to the federal government, it's a
dumpster fire.
Yeah,
there's not much the feds do well. Yeah. Big government, as they say.
Yeah, they're too far away from it. And, you and I have a unique experience with our jobs. We get to go into these places prior to something happening and see, what's not there or what is there. And as you well know, a lot of it's in place, but it's not used correctly.
Yep.
It's not done. It's inconvenient. It's, every excuse in the world. But I think, with what's happened in Texas right now, we're seeing and hearing, from response failure to, how did he gain access to the building, to what happened after that, which is what you do your training on and your expertise on of, how many of those could have been saved by what training you do, even though he did enter. That's where, we can make a difference. And I think each individual has to demand that from where are you dropping your kids off?
Right.
In the afternoon, who's looking out for them all day long? When you go into your place of work, are you protected there? Everybody has to start asking these questions. And, the owners of these companies have to start taking some responsibility in protecting the people who are there.
Yep, for sure. So, this was a client recently shared this with me. I always won't name the client, but I was talking to the HR person and a lot of times that's who we deal with is HR because it's employee wellness related type training that we do, right? And as far as workplace violence prevention or whatever. And she said that the way she convinced the boss to finally do this training was she said, listen, you are not just giving your employees a skill set to use in this building. You're giving your employees a skill set to use at the grocery on their way home tonight, at church on Sunday morning. And that's true. So, for people that are, even if you're just looking to check the box, which I think is not a great way to be as a company or as an organization, then you need to do this. But if you really care about your people, you really care about giving them something that is beneficial, that's where the training comes in. The reality of these events is they're over. Most of the carnage is done prior to law enforcement getting there. That is just a fact. And we're going to get into some specifics here in a little bit, but I think you're right. The organizations have to start saying, okay, we can do more. And in this case, I mean, they had training. I don't know what level in Uvalde, but, Uvalde has really overshadowed the shooting in New York, right? I mean, at the supermarket, and in that one too, the people just that found them, the people in the parking lot didn't have a chance because he shot 4 people in 2 seconds. But the people inside just hit the deck. Right? They heard gunfire outside, and so their instinct was to just hit the floor, and that's where they stayed. And when he walked in, they're laying on the floor, and he just executes them. And it's back to we have to empower the person that finds himself as in the event with knowledge of what to do. That's where we've missed, right? We've gotten better at the police response after Columbine, with obviously several exceptions. We've gotten better at prevention because we're picking up on more of these attacks before they happen. And where we've missed the boat is training the everyday person on how to respond. And I mean, I can't believe I have a company that does this for a living, but here we are.
Yeah, it's sad. And there's a misconception out there, and I didn't realize that, we're in this business every day. We're walking into, all these different companies, all these different schools, churches. We see what's not done. There is a misconception that schools, the doors are all locked and everybody has to check in. And a company's the same way. The reality is, what percentage when you show up to go do a training or just an assessment, do you just walk in?
So it depends. If they know I'm coming, they're usually on their P's and Q's because they know they're having an assessment done that day, or the security consulting training guy is coming. So they're adamant about me checking in, running my license through Raptor if it's a school, all that, right? Then after we train them, now that they know me, and then it's like, out the window. But reality is that there are schools and organizations that, especially schools, that still to this day prop their classroom doors, exterior doors open on a nice day because it's a nice day. And I understand where you're coming from, but what message are you sending to everybody driving by that school? So it's about there's a guy named Michael Del Giorno who's a radio host here in Nashville who always says this saying. I love it. He says, we most often fail not because we don't know what to do, but because we don't do what we know. And that is the case everywhere in a lot of these school shootings, is things that they know or should have known weren't done. It's not that but there's also they don't know too, right? So it's a combination of both, and knowledge is power in every arena, but especially this one.
Yeah. We always say, failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
Yep, 100%.
And that's where we find, is it cost out of their pockets? Yes. What's that worth? I hear, let's just be transparent here. We make a living off selling this stuff.
Sure.
But that's not our goal here today, is not to scare anyone into buying something or doing anything. It's just we see the reality of it. Somebody has to make a parachute too.
That's right.
When you're buying a parachute, I don't know about you, Brink, but if there's a chance I'm going to have to use it, I'm probably not shopping for the cheapest parachute I can find.
No.
But yet that's how we do our building security.
Yep.
And that is alarming. Now, sitting here are two thick books.
Yep.
The NFPA 101, which is Life Safety Code, which any non-construction, non-architectural, non-engineering individual would think Life Safety Code by the National Fire Prevention Association would cover locked doors. And it does. How they have to be unlocked for egress.
Right.
And it's all about fire. And I think we can take a good lead from the NFPA. I want to go, where is our National Mass Shooting Association?
Where's our
prevention?
National Violence Prevention Association, right?
Correct.
I talk about that. I use the phrase the violence epidemic a lot, but we have an epidemic of violence. We already had a mental health crisis in this country prior to a pandemic, and then you drop a pandemic on it, then the mental health crisis in this country is through the roof. So, the FBI covers mass shooting, attacks, active shooter attacks, they call them, in the U.S. every year, and then they compile the stats and all that. And their report just came out from last year. And we saw a 52.5% increase from 2020 to 2021. And you're thinking, or most people, well, that makes sense because 2020, we were all locked down, so we probably didn't have very many. Not true. We had 30 in 2019. We had 40 in 2020. We had a 33% increase in the year we were locked down. And then we come out of that, and we've got a 52.5% increase. So, but just look at the jump from 2019 to 2021. We went from 30 to 61. So, we're back to what are we going to do nationally besides, oh my gosh, there's another mass shooting, and then move on to the next headline. And I'm convinced a lot of well, let's back up. So, Our Lady of the Angel School in, what was it, 1958?
1958 in Chicago.
92 kids died and 3 nuns. Is that right? I think that's right.
Correct.
And so we as a society said, okay, enough. We're done. We're gonna implement things that have to be done to prevent loss of life. Well, in 1958, how many ways were there to get your news? Very few, right? So today, in today's world, because of mobile phones and laptops and iPads and everything else, we are inundated with news, right? Just constantly. And so because of that, the sting wears off, right? Because it doesn't sting as bad when you only get your news from one source and you're not bombarded with stories and, Johnny Depp trials and Amber Heard and just all this, the Kardashians or whatever is happening in your world that day. In 1958, you didn't have all that, right? Like the 90 kids dying in a school fire stung the whole country, and the sting didn't wear off. So we as a country said enough, like we're going to do something, and that's where we have failed. We have not done anything that it makes a meaningful difference. And I hope and pray that this event is that wake up call. Obviously, I scream it from the rooftops because I'm passionate about what I do. I want people to be empowered to save themselves because that's reality. But we haven't made requirements. We haven't done any of this, or they do buy locks or secondary locks like Haven or technology or cameras from you or access control. But then what what fails. It's never the technology. It's the human, right? That's what ends up failing is propping a door, not locking something, not checking footage, not all the above. So how do we fix the human failure part?
Yeah, just like we did with fire.
That's right.
NFPA comes out, they make standards and they make suggestions to codes. Then local jurisdiction adopt out of the NFPA and the NEC National Electric Code, which is all mainly for fire prevention and shock hazard and everything else. And the local jurisdictions take from that and adopt it into either a standard or a code. And
what's the difference for those that don't know?
The difference is a standard is just a suggestion. It's a rule without a consequence.
Gotcha.
So basically it's saying we recommend you do this. Now, can you be held accountable for that? Depends on who has the best attorney when it goes to court. Code is it has to be inspected. It has to be passed. And in this case with fire suppression and notification of smoke and fire both, they have to be inspected annually. Now that's up to your local jurisdiction. What local jurisdictions do you know of that force someone to lock the door of a building for ingress?
Yeah, none. I mean, it can be a rule or it can be a policy, but I mean, I feel certain that in 2022 at the Uvalde, Texas school, Robb Elementary, that the policy was to keep exterior doors locked. I mean, I'm just going to assume that was policy because it's 2022. It wasn't. I mean, so we're back to the human side of this, and the only way to make humans do something is for there to be a consequence if it's not done. Just like you're talking about, if the fire marshal comes out and does the annual inspection, for example, that you're talking about, and finds 4 things that are inoperable and you don't fix them, they can literally shut you down. Where you cannot operate your business, your school. It needs to be the same way. I mean, again, over 70 years since we lost a kid in a school fire, 8 days since we lost 19, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds at a school in Texas. I'm tired of talking about it, but I'm also not tired of talking about it because it's my passion, and we do, just so people know that have never listened to me and Tom yap, we train all sorts of organizations, not just schools, right? I mean, corporations and whatever, but because I'm sick of people dying unnecessarily. But my heart is in schools because I'm really tired of kids dying unnecessarily. And what I find, which is really interesting, you would think around the school environment, the teachers have a heart of a teacher. I mean, you're a former teacher and a coach, right? So what I find is this is a big, scary topic. You would think a lot of them don't. That's not true. When you get down to the educator level, the actual teacher in the classroom, they want this knowledge because those are their kids too. I mean, you're going to tell me that you didn't, I mean, you spent more time with some of those kids than their parents did.
There's, I mean, even in Texas right now, there's teachers that gave their life to protect someone else's kids.
100%.
That in their mind is their kids. The one I feel so sorry for right now that we're reading about that's coming out, and not to pass judgment on them because we don't know the true facts right now. We've heard 2 sides of every story that's coming out, which is normally if there's 2 sides, there's 20 sides, and that's
and the truth somewhere in the middle.
Correct. We're going to see that out of this when the final investigation is done. But the poor teacher who was outside that went inside, at first it was said they propped the door open. And then now her attorney has come back and said, no, she went back and closed the door. Okay, irregardless, we're talking about a teacher here who is taking care of kids all day. Mm-hmm. Everything they can think of is popping up. And, the last thing on their mind during the school day is some sicko coming in and shooting up little kids.
Right.
But now, based off of a teacher's wage and the heart that you talked about that they have, she's had to hire an attorney. She personally.
Yeah.
Has had to hire an attorney. That's an expense. Whether she did wrong or whether she didn't, these are things that we have to change in society of how we think. It's not just that teacher's fault. The kids should be able to notice, hey, that door's propped open.
Right.
Something could happen. It's not just that's where the mind change has to come.
Yep.
It's sad. I mean, we've always been in a country to where, that wasn't your, thought all day, every day. But it is, the responsibility falls on every single individual to either do something or demand something.
Yep, well said. And the I talk often when I do, either speaking engagements or training about it's not difficult. It's literally about changing habits. It's not a hard thing. It's hard to get some people to change their habits sometimes, but the actual act that we need people to go through and the things they need to do are not difficult things. They're not difficult to remember. I typically ask every group that I'm speaking to, I will look at the whole group and say, and that's whether it's 50 or 500, and say, who is responsible for safety and security at this facility? And inevitably, all of them say, we all are. And I'm like, that's exactly right. So you need to be holding each other accountable if somebody's doing something they're not supposed to. And those of y'all that are going to get mad when they hold you accountable and call you out on it, you can't get mad now because you just sat here in front of me and everybody else in this room and said we're all accountable for it. That's tough conversations to have, because back to cell phones and social media and all that, as humans, we care so much about what people think of us anyway. But now it's like hyper elevated what people think of us because of social media. And, we all know we don't live the life we do on Facebook and Instagram. We're a bunch of liars. But we just care so much about that it affects our ability to do what we know we should do, and back to we don't do what we know.
Yeah. Let's go through some of the schools shootings, workplace violence, to where measures were in place, but, either, as you said, the human failed or the thought process. And I want to go into where there's some issues on that thought process of, what they actually did. How did they spend their money? Yep. You're required now to put in a fire alarm. You're required to do all that, so we don't argue the cost of it. It's up to the individual school district, business, whoever, to spend the money to put in, anything for crime prevention, or mass shootings. People can opt to spend that or not spend that.
Sure.
Okay, well, when's the liability change? But let's look at the ones that did, because there's a lot of, assumptions that schools are heavily protected.
Right.
And obviously they're not. And so you spend a lot of time studying each of these. So what have you seen?
So, and there's different, definitions of protected, right? So, I usually start with Columbine. It was not the first one, but it was kind of the first big one that got everybody's attention. That was in 1999. So we're, April of this year was 23 years ago, right? So we should, it's frustrating. We should be better at this as a country. Physical security wise, let me just say this about school shootings. Close to 90% are current or former staff or student, with the majority of that being student. So, yes, physical security is very important for a lot of reasons, not just an active shooter, child custody, child molesters. I mean, all the above. We want to keep all the bad guys out of our schools, period. However, if we know that the majority of the shooters are current or former staff or student, they're probably going to know how to exploit the system, right? What time they come out for recess, all that stuff, right? So it's back to, do we know how to respond when something happens? Columbine, for example, had a school resource officer. He was there, and he was in his car eating lunch. He was notified via radio there was a problem on that end of school. He responded. They shot at him with a 9mm carbine rifle. He took cover behind his car and shot back. They were about 60 yards apart, so they didn't hit each other. Shooter turned around, went back in the building, and he called for backup and waited on SWAT, because in 1999, that's what you did. Now, something as simple as locked interior doors in Columbine saved countless kids. These guys understand, although they're obviously not mentally sane at that moment, right? If you want to commit mass murder, you obviously have a mental problem, okay? But they understand the minute they pull the trigger the first time in that attack, that starts the clock. They know that. So in Columbine, in the 49 minutes that attack lasted, they did not attempt to, nor did they breach a single locked door. If they hit a locked door, they moved on. I know it sounds elementary, but it works, and we know it works. So if you fast forward 13 years to Sandy Hook, we had we had exterior doors locked.
We had cameras.
Yep.
We had exterior doors locked with two-way communication electronically for who's outside to inside.
Yep. And what was next to the front door what were the front doors and the facade of the building made out of? Glass, right. So all he did at Sandy Hook, 9:34 in the morning, he shot through that. It was a giant side light, full-length glass. And it was tempered glass, so it didn't just fall in. It shattered. But then he stuck his rifle in there and raked out a hole big enough for him to step through. That's 9:34. 9:35 in the morning, first 911 call. 9:39, first cop arrives on that campus, and 9:40 is final gunshot. He took his own life before they could ever get in the building. Killed 20 children and 6 teachers. The classroom doors in Sandy Hook were not lockable from the inside of the room. This is back to a design thing, and I've talked to multiple architects and designers about this, and the thinking has been all along, well, what if a kid goes in there and locks themselves in the room? And I look at them and say, use your key and open the door. And I just get this blank look, like, right, like, we've got to start changing. So literally, after the entire study and everything was done on Sandy Hook, the number one recommendation in the Sandy Hook After Action Report, classroom door is lockable from the inside. Victoria Soto, who's one of the teachers that was killed, was found with her keys laying right next to her. And obviously the theory is she was trying to get to her door to lock it with her key from the hallway side. And he went in 2 classrooms, much like Uvalde, Texas. 2. Classroom 8 and 10. He didn't go anywhere else. That place was massive. It could have been way worse. So again, let's talk about glass. You and I are very familiar with what's called security laminate. Some people call it window film, security film. It is a film, basically. It's a laminate, but whatever. That can be applied to glass that greatly reduces an intruder's ability to breach that piece of glass. At least will slow them down significantly. I mean, I know you're very intimately familiar with this from a recent incident, but they also make a laminate now that is bulletproof and will keep bullets from penetrating glass. Do I think every school in America needs bulletproof window laminate? No, I don't. Do I think every school in America needs security laminate on anything ground level? 100%. Like we've got to keep them from getting into the school. What do they need before that? Somebody to tell them what to do if something does happen, right? Like we've got to do both. Like it's again, technology, obviously you make a living doing awesome security technology stuff. And your stuff is a force multiplier too. And that's another big thing about your piece that people don't think about. And I was asked about this on the phone literally yesterday. I was talking to a church in Memphis. And the guy's like, I don't understand everybody pushing cameras. What are cameras going to do? They're just going to tell me what happened after it's over. I'm like, no, not if you use them proactively. They're a huge force multiplier. Like on a Sunday morning, how many places can you watch with one guy versus 18 warm bodies? I mean, again, that's people's box that they're not getting out of. But obviously you make a living in and out of that box, right? So if you were talking to, I mean, obviously school's hot topics right now, but you're talking to any client, what do you tell them first as far as what, and I know it depends on what, but just from a general, security standpoint, what do you go first with for them as far as what you do?
As far as technology goes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we break it up in 3, parts, basically. We look at the perimeter, we look at the shell, and then we look at the cell. And that's how we, you have to have 100% protection between the 3.
Right.
Now your percentages can change. A church wants to be welcoming. It wants to be, open to individuals. So therefore your perimeter is probably going to be less percentage of your security.
Yeah, like non-existent. You're going to be able to get right up to the building.
Correct.
24 hours a day.
And then when we say your shell, that's the
building.
The building
outside,
itself.
Right, the exterior.
Correct. So we want to limit the number of doors that we're going in and out of. Churches and schools alike. I mean, door manufacturers, they must have a hand in the architect's pocketbook because there's, 30 doors that we don't need 30 doors of.
But what are they about, though? They're about convenience, right?
Correct.
And what do we always say don't exist in the same world?
Yeah, well, it's you can't have convenience and security together. It's a balance. Give one, take one.
Right.
Now, a lot of the doors that are there, come from these books we talked about, or their codes, so that people, if there is a fire, they can get out of the building.
Yep.
And so they have to be there, but not for ingress. That's for egress.
Right.
So on those doors, we want to put access control. We want to lock those doors, make sure they're locked. They're scheduled to take some of the human element out of it.
Right.
It still needs a human element to go check and make sure they did, because sometimes technology does fail.
Right.
They need to be checked. So we want to put that there. And when you do that, to keep somebody outside, you must have two-way communication. So you've got to have a way to get into the building for the people who are supposed to be there. And then we want to lock out the ones that aren't supposed to be there. And then two-way communication to keep them on the outside. We know once that gun enters the building, or knife, or whatever it is,
right,
it's not going to end well that day.
Correct.
It's a bad thing. Now, your training and the medical care training that you'll talk about, yes, that limits it. But once it's in, it's not good.
No, it's going to happen, right, once it's in.
So our main goal is to keep it out. Cameras. We talk about it being a force multiplier, and people sometimes don't understand what that means. Okay, so, through all of Fox News and everything during the shooting, they had all these different experts on, to put somebody to watch every door and blah, 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 it would cost this much, and this many people would be needed across the country to do this. Okay, a force multiplier are your cameras. You still have to have the human element there. Matter of fact,
sure,
it at a minimum, we like to say you need two officers there. One who is watching cameras and has total communication with the outside world and with the responding officer who is there.
Yep.
One you can see and get to, which is the responding officer, and the other is tucked away somewhere. And they are watching, they're uninterrupted, so that they can communicate with the responding officers where the shooter is, what's going on inside, and the other one is there for him to direct to a threat, whether it be, on the outside of the building. And you can correct me in this, is how many of them walked up to the school with the gun out? It wasn't hidden, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I don't have that off the top of my head, but several, right? Because stuff has happened outside of the school first. Oftentimes, I can think of a handful off the top of my head that Seattle Pacific University and Columbine, right? Like all that stuff started outside.
How many shots were fired outside?
So in Uvalde, he fired shots outside, crashed, shot all over the place, shot down the side of the building. So correct, cameras. If you got somebody watching that and then providing real-time intel via a two-way radio, whatever, preferably a two-way radio, to the responding officers, how quickly can we get there versus we just hear gunshots and we don't know where they're coming from, because we don't have that force multiplier in cameras to be able to look. Or now, like in Parkland, Florida, we're going back and trying to, and we don't realize that there's a huge delay. It's not live what I'm watching.
Exactly. The technology was there, but it was
imagine trying to operate their probably DVR at Uvalde in that situation to figure out, are you kidding me? Like it's over at that point. So the proactive use of your cameras, and what do you always hit on about cameras too? It's not about number of cameras. It's about
the quality of cameras and the placement of the cameras. The placement's huge.
Right.
And that's where we try and work with our customers. That's where we try and work with, who's making the decisions at the schools, the churches, the businesses of, hey, let's make sure. And I want to make something real clear. Even though we make our living off selling that stuff, they're overbought.
Yeah.
For the most part, we have too many cameras in the wrong locations and at the wrong angles to actually do something with it.
Right.
And they need somebody to tell them, hey, that's why we limit the number of doors, of entry and exit, because there are analytics. And these things all cost money. We get that. It's expensive. But if you have fewer entry doors, then there's fewer analytics to put around the building.
Yep.
There's weapon detection on analytics right now. Are there false positives? Absolutely. But at least I want to be alerted to where, the officer that I said is inside tucked away watching that, he gets alerted that, hey, something may look like a gun. Let me take a look at it outside.
Right.
Oh, that's his umbrella. Okay, it's not. So we have that. At the entryways, there are two systems right now. Everybody's used to the old metal detectors where you have to stand in single file lines,
Right.
drop all your gear in a little bucket, pass it over. Everybody gets to see whatever you have in your pockets that day, and go through the metal detector. Which, I hate to say it, but they're not always that accurate. They're better than nothing.
Well, and again, what they also require human intervention, right? I mean, I set off a metal detector at an airport and was not stopped. Like within the last 8 years.
Correct.
So,
well,
but there's other systems besides metal detectors, right?
Yes, there's systems now that you can walk through that are used at NHL games, at NFL games, to where you can walk through without emptying your pockets, which will allow students to come in faster. They're not stopped unless they trigger the system. That's technology that is out there. The
one that you're talking about at Opry, I recently was involved in they were doing I guess it's a calibration thing they do on that system ever so often. But as a result, they were testing it with different weapons and different placement of weapons and all that. And I got to participate in that. And it's awesome. I mean, it like I tried to beat it like in every sneaky way I've ever snuck something in anywhere in my past life, right? I tried to beat it and I couldn't beat it. And I can't remember what it's called right now off the top of my head. But if y'all want to know, reach out to Tom Herring at herringtechnology.com. But again, back to this is where you and I, like the two roads meet in all the stuff you're talking about, minimizing entry points. I talk about in the deter piece of the DEFEND acronym, which is first, establishing a primary entryway. Because much like what you're talking about, if we have an obvious primary entryway, right, that it's obvious where visitors and deliveries are supposed to come, then and like great signage, right, all over the property, like then if somebody tries to come in, door number 18, that's always a red flag to everybody in that building because we have perfect signage. There's no reason anybody should ever go to the wrong door on my property.
It's as simple as if that is an egress door, there shouldn't be a damn handle on the outside. That
100%.
says to a visitor, to anybody, hey, this door's not for you.
That's right.
Go to the front door. It makes me so mad because these people, we don't want it to look like a prison. It doesn't have to.
No.
Use your shrubbery. Use your walks. Use your signage.
Yep.
Is so important in that. And to get architects and to get school administrators and business administrators to understand that when you have a confusing campus, whether it be corporate, whether it be school, doesn't matter. You're telling people to go walk around.
Right.
Strangers.
Yeah, and go to the wrong door all the time.
Yeah.
Which, P.S., you get let in half the time, too.
Correct. You walk up to a fifth grader, he's going to let you in.
Yeah.
They're kids. They're nice. They're not thinking that man is here to do evil or that female. They let them in.
Right.
Or a door that's locked, they sit there and bang on it. Okay, you have to train your employees and everybody. Don't go open that door. Make them go I don't care if you act like you don't hear it.
Right.
But do not open that door. Technology is that way. We have to have two means of egress, on a door that's locked so that people can get out because of, back to our codes for fire that we don't have for shooters. You have to have two means of egress. So in the design of it, back to our architects and to everybody and, whoever decides and how they want their building built, they don't take into account if somebody's beating on that door and somebody walks up just to see who it is, it just opened the door for them.
Right.
So that has to be planned out. You have to look at how you're doing your exit devices at the doors. Our biggest problem, buildings are built. Now, we all know it's cheaper and easier to do everything we're talking about, from in-swing doors to the locks on the classroom doors when the building's built.
You mean outswing doors?
Correct.
Yep.
So you can't kick the door in.
Right.
So, sorry, I get my in and out mixed up a lot of
That's
times.
the
That's why I
Mississippi in
walk
you.
and beat my head on the door. But the problem is,
And that's cheap, right? Like, it doesn't really cost you anything else.
you got to pay for it anyway.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Like outswing doors, the right handle with a lock on the inside. I mean, it
A
costs.
pushed or twist lock.
That's right. What does it cost up front to do this? Pretty much the same it costs for everything else. I mean, people are so reactive instead of proactive.
Correct.
And I spoke at the American Institute of Architecture convention in Knoxville, the Tennessee version, a few years ago on safer school design to talk about some of this stuff, because it does start with architects. It really does.
Absolutely.
Like, they're the ones starting with that piece of paper, so we need to empower them with knowledge on easy stuff to do. But it's not in here.
It's not made them to do.
We're not making them do it, but there are a lot of them are starting to do it. But the schools that don't have it, I mean, I can't tell you how many of my school clients now still have classroom doors that are not lockable from the inside. Number one recommendation in the Sandy Hook After Action Report, and I would bet well over half the schools that I've worked with still don't have classroom doors lockable from inside the classroom because they weren't made to do it. It's not going to happen to me. We keep our doors locked. Okay. And a lot of them do that, right? They're not lockable from the inside. They say, we keep them locked. And so when I do walkthroughs, I check them. And I always find classroom doors that are left unlocked because, well, it's so inconvenient and interrupts the class if Johnny has to go use the bathroom and I got to let him back in the room. I'm like, it's inconvenient. 19 kids dying. That's pretty inconvenient.
You want to try you talk about inconvenient, try going to 19 funerals.
That's right.
Now.
Talk to those 19 families. And on that note, I say this all the time, and I don't, of course, I scream this crap from the rooftops, but we owe it to every victim of every one of these attacks, not just kids, but every single victim and their surviving family members to be better at this as a nation. And we're not. And I don't know, again, I don't know how we get there. I think, again, back to your point, I think the sting is not wearing off, and it's not going to wear off for a long time, and that's good because that's going to cause a lot of conversation and hopefully movement from people in the right direction. But again, teachers want this knowledge. That's what I find. It's usually at the administrative level that they're, we got so much other stuff, and I get it as an educator. I mean, think about all the crap you had to do, the in-services and the trainings and all. I mean, again, it's a lot. I understand, but what I find is they want this information, and it's a life skill outside of school. It's not hard, or your corporate business park, or your headquarters, this is Middle Tennessee. How many corporate headquarters do we have here? I mean, a ton. How many of them have training? I know for a fact a bunch that don't, because we're talking to a lot of them.
And here's the thing. We've been in, the security side of it and the construction side even longer. 22 years. Mm-hmm. We sit at the table a lot of times when buildings are being designed and being planned. They do. They reach out to us and call us in. The funny part of it is, Brink, when we get there, we sit down and there may be an architect, an engineer, the owner, the developer, the property manager, whoever else, all in this design meeting. And you're sitting there, and I'm like, golly, they called us in for security on the front end. We are going to get this right. And I get there to the meeting, Brink. Guess who's not sitting at that round table with everybody planning this? Their own personal security administrator, whoever it is. We're talking about places that have a security director.
Right.
Why are they not sitting at that table?
100%.
You know what they do? They go in, and then the architect and the engineer and everybody starts looking at it and putting the budget together, and, we need this marble countertop in the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's your 14th bathroom on the 5th floor. More than, we're going to have to cut out 8 cameras. We're not going to be able to put those locks on that door. That analytic, it's great and it helps, but we don't have to have it right now. But we need that marble countertop.
Right.
And
back
so
to want versus need.
Correct. And so they build that building right then. And they go and do it. And the minute they open it, you know what? You know who they go get? Mr. Security Director over there, and go to him and say, "Come in. We need you to secure this building and keep us all safe."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, nothing's changing until he is sitting or she is sitting at that table. And not only sitting at that table, has the authority to say, "No,
Right.
that is not how we're doing it. We're doing it this way." And when the priority becomes on security, we'll see change.
Yep.
But not until then. And I can't tell you how many times that happens. It is more common than them being there. Or let's say they do bring them in. They just overrule everything they say because they don't want to pay for it. And it's like, guys, if code doesn't make you do it, somebody's going to hold you liable for it.
Right.
That's where I get so angry of they set them out. Or let's say the opposite. They're going to spend the least amount they have to on that security director.
Right. What do you think you're getting as a result?
Correct.
Right? I mean, you're just quality costs money. End of story.
When they go hire a CFO, you think they're going with the cheapest one out there?
Absolutely
Nope.
not.
They're going to see who's going to build that bottom line.
That's right.
Okay, try building that bottom line when your business is shut down because you just had a mass shooting.
Right.
It doesn't matter who your CFO is right then. I can even count that, and I am
right
from Mississippi, and still I can get that. You ain't making nothing, buddy.
Yeah, and it goes. It goes back to prioritizing this, and I think it's gonna. I think we got to come at it from two directions. What you said earlier was faculty, staff, employees, associates are going to have to start demanding this of their institution, whatever it is, their organization, their corporation. They're going to have to say, what, this is a thing. Like, what are y'all doing for us? Like, and we're going to have some of this, some code, and we're going to have to make them do it. And if it's not done, there has to be accountability for shutting down that school, shutting down that business, when the CFO really will start going, holy crap, how much money are we losing while I can't even walk in to my office because we didn't do something we were supposed to do. That's what changed in the fire world. That's what it's going to take to change in the violence world. I mean, it just is. Where we start, I don't know. I mean, anybody's willing to listen, I'm willing to talk. This is all I do is study the crap out of these events. And because I am focused on the training piece, but this needs to be a more holistic kind of multifaceted approach. None of us have the solution, right? Together, though, we do have a lot of solutions on mitigation. You and I agree, and I think most people would agree. There's no way we will ever stop every one of these attacks. It's just impossible. However, if we can prevent access to a lot of them, then that's a huge start. Or if we can mitigate the amount of damage they can do during the event, that is a huge start. I typically say most criminals want two things, access and anonymity. Active shooters don't care about anonymity, right?
It's the exact opposite.
That's right. But what do they still have to have? Access. That they still have to have access to victims to be able to commit their carnage. So, it goes back to your technology, it goes back to design, it goes back to training, and it goes back to how serious does the organization take it on a regular basis. And, the overall consensus that I find is not enough organizations take it seriously. There are some that take it very seriously, and the culture is fantastic. That's not normal.
We have one. We had a workplace violence shooting here in Nashville, one of our clients.
Yep.
Guess what? It took a lot of different pieces, but it turned out to be a success.
Yep.
They had someone heard him make a threat. He left the building, told him he was going to return and cause a problem. That individual took responsibility and let somebody know.
Right.
And they immediately locked down the building with their technology and their responding officers. The individual went to the car, got a gun, came back, could not enter the building, shot through the glass at the guards, hitting, I believe it was 3 guards. They returned fire, hitting him. He never gained access to the building, and let's just say his day didn't end so well. It ended, but not well for him.
Yep.
But not an employee inside was harmed.
Right.
So it does work. We know it works. Now, your business and what you do is we can't stop them. You're not going to stop them all, and it doesn't matter if it's a gun, if it's a knife, if it's a car in a crowd.
Right.
And it's not what you teach and train isn't confined to just that place of business, as you stated earlier. That's for anywhere you go after that. You have that knowledge of what to do.
Yep.
So let's just say our technology did not work. They gained access by however means they did. Can we still save lives once they get inside and start going?
1,000%.
And is it too late then? Or should we just give up at that point?
No, I mean, I can tell you with certainty, like we'll use Sandy Hook as a classic example. He started his attack in room 10. If room 8 had a lock on the inside of the door, I'd venture to say everybody in room 8 would have survived because it was an outswing door. It was locked, but it wasn't lockable from the inside. So that alone right there could have done the fact that Uvalde took over an hour to actually go in there and shoot that dude in the face just crawls all over me because of my former career in law enforcement. But how many of those kids either bled to death or worse, died of tension pneumothorax, which is a horrible way to die, and you can prevent it literally with your bare hand or anything inclusive if you know what you're doing. In over an hour, I can all but guarantee you some kids died of that. And you know, what was there anybody in that building that would have known how to treat anybody? They didn't have the opportunity. But another good example of that is in 2018, the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. He shot the first few officers that showed up outside. Like, he was inside, he shot at them. So they, back to 1999 tactics, backed out and called SWAT. And their reasoning, I think similar to Uvalde, was that they didn't hear any more gunshots. So they felt like it was now a barricade situation instead of an active shooter situation. And I said, well, number one, garbage. Number two, it's your job to go in there and take care of that. And number three, how many people died that could have been saved had y'all gone in 40 minutes that you didn't go in? So again, most law enforcement are awesome. Matt Murphy, radio host here in Nashville, likes to say it this way, and I couldn't agree more. Police and fire are not the first responders. You're the first responder. That's reality. And people need to have this knowledge on how to treat themselves or someone else. It's not complicated. It's actually easier than CPR if you take a class and you have a few pieces of equipment. And we've got 2 saves under our belts from people that have gone through our training. Both were tourniquet applications, and both were car accidents. Right? Bleeding control and pre-hospital care is a life skill, like CPR, like knowing what to do if you're in the grocery and gunshots ring out. It is a life skill. At this point in society, it needs to be an everyday life skill, and it's not, and people continue to die because it's not. And I don't know, again, what it's going to take. I know my email inbox is blowing up, and my phone is blowing up over the last 8 days. Great problem to have as a business, terrible for society. But, the more outreach that you and I can do, right, and all those people in this industry to drive the point home, the better off we're all going to be. I mean, again, yes, we make our living doing this, but it's a passion for both of us. I mean, everybody that meets us knows that instantly, that this is not just some BS sales pitch. I mean, we are passionate about what we do.
We want to give listeners some ideas and some things to arm themselves, and when I say arm themselves, with knowledge of what they can go ask for. Or a Glock, either way. I'm definitely not against that. But with proper training and proper background to get it.
Yep.
But I want people to know what to go ask for. People are sick and tired of it. Even Hollywood right now. I mean, I don't know, the NBA coach that came, all of a sudden they become experts on everything.
Right.
And Matthew McConaughey the other, they didn't claim, they're not hollering gun control now. They're hollering do something.
Right.
Okay, well, let's get to those people and use their power to say, okay, these are things you can actually do.
Sure.
Or we can sit and scream at each other and debate gun control and everything else that's not going to make any difference in it, especially immediately.
Right.
So these are immediate steps that we've talked about right now that people can go to, wherever they go,
right,
and use the training that you offer. As you said, you more than likely are going to use it elsewhere than in your place of business or school.
that's right, sure.
You're going to pass a wreck. You're going to pass, something's going to happen somewhere to where that can be used right then to save a life.
Yep.
We just have to get everybody, they're motivated.
Yep.
They just don't know which direction to go. And they get caught up in a political argument where we have sat and spun for 20 years now and done basically nothing.
Yep.
So,
and then all of a sudden it's step on the gas. We got to do something. Well, I've been screaming this and everybody else. And you're going to tell me the victims of all these families from all these school shootings haven't been screaming it since their kid died? They've all been screaming it, and nothing's changed. And again, I hope this one stings enough to make some meaningful change and create some code and get people fired up enough, regardless of political affiliation, to say, okay, we can do something and we will do something, and just like we did in 1958 after that school fire.
Correct.
And that's where we are.
It's personal responsibility. It's demand it from where you're at, and then it's get it to your local jurisdictions, to the people who are making the codes and getting some of this put in, and demanded that they do it. Because let's face it, you got people out there that aren't going to spend the money.
That's right.
Because they don't care.
Well, you and I both are passionate around this topic and are all about education. And so on that note, I want people to know we do have an event coming up in July. I know that technically dates this episode, but whatever. July 12th at Lipscomb University here in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a free event open to the public, or we'll do some training, and we'll have a panel to answer questions between me and Tom and probably a member of law enforcement. So by all means, stay tuned for that kind of information. The best way to find that information and keep up with it is check the website at defendsystems.com, defend with a D, systems with an S at the end.com. The event information will be on there soon. Again, it will be free and open to the public because education is empowerment. And at the end of the day, we need everybody empowered.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, folks. Tune in.
Have a good day.